Thank you very much, Chair. May I also join colleagues in welcoming the delegation of Egypt in thanking you, the delegation and the State of the Arab Republic of Egypt for the submission of its report under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Maputo Protocol. I will be raising questions in relation to the portfolio that I hold regarding the Working Group on Extractive Industries, Environment and Human Rights Violations in Africa. The Constitution of Egypt, and therefore I would address myself with respect to Article 21 of the Charter on the right of peoples to free disposal of wealth and natural resources, and Article 24 of the Charter on the right to environment. The Constitution of Egypt guarantees that natural resources belong to the people. Article 32 of the Egyptian Constitution highlights that the state commits to preserving the resources and exploitation and subsequently preventing their depletion, taking into consideration the rights of future generations. The working group that I chair commends this provision with its concern also for preserving natural resources for the benefit of future generations as well. And indeed, it's unique in that respect, including here on the African continent. The same provision highlights that the right to exploit natural resources or a concession to a public utility shall take place by law for a period of not exceeding 30 years. One of the questions I have is, we in the African Commission, through the working group that I chair, adopted a state reporting guidelines and principles on Articles 21 and 24 of the Charter, which outlines the kind of information that we seek from member states in terms of the implementation of Articles 21 and 24 of the Charter. But looking through the report, much of the information provided is on provisions that are contained in the Constitution. It doesn't provide the kind of detailed information that is expected to reflect the steps taken by Egypt in respect to the 5 provisions of Article 21 and that of Article 24. I would like to request your clarification on why we have this omission in the report, and if there is anything that we can do to assist to fill in exactly this gap. I would also like to kindly get your feedback on whether or not there is actually a law that is put in place to operationalize Article 32, particularly in terms of the granting of concession for a period not exceeding 30 years. And it says that it would be provided by law. Is this law already in place, and what kind of safeguards and what kind of standards does it provide in terms of the obligations that these grantees of licenses need to comply with under Egyptian law and indeed under human rights law that Egypt is a party to, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. What are the requirements in this respect, particularly from the perspective of extractive industries, for allocation of fair percentage of revenues to local communities in areas where these extractive industries are undertaking their businesses and their operations, and indeed the kind of distribution that exists between local communities and the national level. We also would like to get information on who in terms of state agencies or regulatory bodies, is responsible for the regulation and governance of natural resources in Egypt, and what kind of power and authority does this regulatory body has in terms of monitoring, inspection, and also holding business enterprises accountable for failure to comply with established standards in that respect. In terms of also the requirements under Article 21 of the Charter, read together with the broader African Charter provisions, what guarantees do you have for the participation and consultation of communities, local communities, and citizens with respect to addressing concerns that they may have in terms of the granting of licenses to huge business enterprises that may affect their land, their environment, and what kind of guarantees do you have for ensuring that in the event of their concerns not being addressed and they get affected by those business operations, the kind of redress, the kind of accountability measures that is provided in Egyptian law, and if you can provide us examples that illustrate actually the steps that have been taken in that respect. With respect to Article 24 of the Charter, the right to environment, I understand from our reading of reports on environment in Egypt, there are certain industries that heavily affect the environment, particularly in terms of pollution of air, such as the cement industry, for example. And some of the cost of that, not only in terms of, such as in terms of the health burden that it creates, is reported to be very significant for the GDP of Egypt. And we would like to know what kind of steps are being taken to contain and address the environmental pollution that some of these industries are occasioning to people, and whether you actually have an assessment of the impact that this is having on the health of communities and people living in those areas, and the kind of measures that are being put in place, not only to limit, but also to hold those industries accountable, and also to provide remedies for people whose health and whose land and water sources have been affected as a result of these pollutions. And also, if you can inform us the kind of legislation that is in place for, apart from those that you mentioned in your report, in terms of environmental protection, but importantly, the regulatory framework and institutions that are in place for safeguarding environmental standards and also enforcing those standards, and what authorities do they have actually for enforcing those environmental standards. For example, are there any business enterprises that have been removed in terms of their licenses as a result of their non-compliance or serious breaches of environmental standards in Egypt? And also the kind of, I think, compensation, reparation, or just access to justice that is available for individuals and communities. For example, are individuals and communities entitled to take businesses or government to court for the health problems that they have endured as a result of the pollution of the environment? Thank you for your kind attention. I look forward to your kind feedback. Chair, over to you.